WNST off after a wet Sunday afternoon. It is duck weather, but apparently it's Raven weather as well. Ravens beating the Denver Broncos on Sunday afternoon at M&T Bank Stadium, 27-14. Luke, it looks sort of like a garden variety AFC win, but sort of anything but, I think, on a wet day, and nothing that leads us to believe that the Ravens aren't a pretty decent team. Offense moved the ball, defense played decently, some things could have gone better. It's a National Football League game. You win by 2 touchdowns. I feel good about it.
Yeah, and I think that's the way to take it away. I mean, or to take from it. I think it was a good win. I don't know if there's anything about this, and we're finding this out, and we do this every year. After week 1, we make bold proclamations, not just really about the Ravens, but anyone. And then you see what happens a week later, and then in week 3, Buffalo, who many of us were wondering if they were going to win a game, you see what they do against the Minnesota Vikings. So
this league doesn't really make any sense. It never makes any sense, does it, right?
Exactly. So I think what's important to take away from this game is the Ravens got to win. And we understand that they have a really big stretch coming up, 3 straight road games, 2 of them in the division, with Pittsburgh next week, of course, and Cleveland, who suddenly looks different than your typical Browns team, if for no other reason than a really intriguing rookie quarterback. But it was important for the Ravens to get this win. And when you look at how it started, with right off the bat, Flacco sacked on the second play of the game, and then the punt is blocked, sets up an easy touchdown, and it's 7-0, 90 seconds into the game.
By the way, that was the worst start in Raven history. I mean, I'm not. That's not her hyperbole for me, right? I don't think any thing could be worse on a wet day after losing after 10 days. You know, all the parts of it, to be looking up 90 seconds in and be down 7-0 with the scenario and the way it unfolded. It was nightmarish. I mean, it's the worst start I've ever seen them have at home, honestly.
Well, I mean, it depends how you want to define start. I mean, they fell behind by 3 touchdowns really quickly last week. So, but in terms of 90 seconds, I can't think of it off the top of my head. It was a bad start. There's no question. But the point is, they didn't go into any sense of panic. They didn't get out of their game plan or anything like that. Nor should they. I mean, as Joe Flacco said in the post-game press conference, there's 58 and a half minutes left to play. I mean, that's an eternity. So, it was an ugly start. There's no question about that, but they settled in pretty quickly. The offense played really well. The defense really, after the first quarter, played some pretty exceptional football for large stretches of that game. I think Denver had a total of 98 yards in the second and third quarters combined. So clearly they settled in, and they made some big plays when they needed to. Certainly they had some lapses. It wasn't a perfect performance. They're dealing with injuries. They had some other guys get banged up, not necessarily catastrophic injuries, but it was definitely kind of a walking wounded feel to the post-game locker room with some different guys getting treatment and everything. But they got to win. They took care of business, and I really didn't view Week 3 as one of those games that was going to make you really overly impressed if the Ravens got a win. But if they had lost the game, then you start to wonder, is this team any good? So they took care of business. They did what they needed to do. They won in relatively comfortable fashion. Joe Flacco, maybe he just needs to play in the rain every single week because he was terrific. But overall, I think you have to be pleased with what the Ravens were able to do. They overcame the kind of sleepwalking start, and they played pretty darn well after that. You don't like seeing some of the special teams lapses, and there are certain things you can pick apart, but a win is a win, and I think this one, there was plenty to like, even with the start and some other things that you can point to over the course of the game that maybe weren't quite as impressive.
Well, let's go through, not the warts, but the good parts of the game. And obviously, the offense at this point and Flacco and this is in progress, right? The running game, the offensive line, which we're always sort of worried about, right? But the tight end thing is real. This group of wide receivers, very early on, this is a better group of wide receivers than we've had here, even when Crabtree's dropping the ball. So, I think it's a mixed bag to some degree, but there is great promise here. This is a better offense than what we've seen here the last few years, which might not be saying much, but this might be a top half of the league offense if it's done right.
And that's kind of where I thought they needed to be. I mean, I don't expect this offense to be elite. I don't think on paper it looks like it should be elite. But I think when you look at what they were able to do, and keep in mind, they still haven't had Hayden Hurst. They still haven't really had their offensive line fully gel just yet. I think as much as they were able to hold off Von Miller, I think you have to give Marty Morningwig as much credit as anything. I thought the game plan with quick passes, throws to backs, having Flacco roll out a little bit here and there, they did a really good job in trying to offset that Denver pass rush. But, I wouldn't say this offense is firing on all cylinders by any stretch, but to your point, with the additions that they made at wide receiver, tight end, Mark Andrews, who I kid you not, throughout the preseason or throughout training camp, and even through most of the preseason until that preseason finale, you're kind of looking at him and saying, well, what did the Ravens see with this guy? He's done nothing. He's been hurt. When he's been out there, he hasn't done anything. And it's just like a light switch came on with him, and he's been a real part of their offense. He's done a nice job catching passes down the seam. So they clearly have some more potential, more talent at the tight end position than they've had in quite some time. Really have to go back to a healthy Dennis Pitta, probably before his first hip injury, quite frankly, because he wasn't the same player when he
Super
came
Bowl
back,
Dennis Pitta, right, 2013 Pitta, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then you look at the wide receivers, and I was always very careful to make the emphatic statement that they were way better at wide receiver. I thought all along it was a good plan in terms of the diversity and skill set. Crabtree being the more the possession guy for third downs, for red zone plays. John Brown clearly being the home run hitter, but much more diverse in what he can do than, say, a Mike Wallace or a Jacoby Jones. And we've seen that. He's not just someone who catches a deep ball. He can do different things and has more sophisticated route running and can get separation in and out of routes, which is something that you wouldn't always say about someone like Mike Wallace or Jacoby Jones, who could really catch the deep ball.
Well, they've had a lot of one-dimensional wide receivers, and even that one dimension wasn't like incredible. I mean, Torrey Smith was good at what he did, but it wasn't like elite or any of that. Maybe Bolden was one-dimensional as possession and having, some beef about him. But this guy feels like he catches the ball in traffic. He's a little fearless. He's a good route runner. He can go deep. There's a lot to like about him, and clearly Flacco trusts him, right?
Yeah, and we've seen Flacco throw the ball to John Brown a whole lot. I mean, last week against Cincinnati, plenty of targets, didn't connect on as many of those as you'd like, but he still obviously put up a big game, had the touchdown, and we saw him again make big plays on Sunday against the Denver secondary. Let's keep in mind, a Denver secondary that was really banged up. They didn't have Adam Jones. They were down to a rookie. Basically their fifth corner, Isaac Yedem, was kind of their nickel out on the field as the game was going on, and the Ravens went after him. But, John Brown is someone who, anyone who watched him play in Arizona, and we talked about this from the time that the Ravens signed him back in March, anyone who watched this kid play with the Cardinals when he was healthy, especially in 2015, they were all talking about him being the heir apparent to Larry Fitzgerald. Not that he'd be a Hall of Famer, but that he was going to be the future number one wide receiver for them. And the injuries really derailed that, really sidetracked that as far as him just not being able to stay on the field. But I think from the first few days of training camp, he flashed a little bit in the spring, was also dealing with a little bit of a cranky knee, so he made some plays here and there, but didn't really wow you. But really from the first week of training camp in July, he would wow you out there watching him. And I've done 9 of these training camps at this point. I've seen plenty of guys do impressive things in the summer when it doesn't matter yet, but he was really impressive, and he's carried that over, and he's been, he's been a playmaker for them, which they just haven't had nearly enough of that on the offensive side of the ball. So you have Crabtree, you have John Brown, Willie Snead has made plays. We mentioned the tight ends. I mean, this is just a more diverse group of pass catchers. I don't know where it ranks in the hierarchy of the NFL. It's not top 5. I probably wouldn't. I wouldn't have it in the top 10. I'm pretty certain.
Well, they're not paying for that either, right?
Right. I mean, and that's the point with the value that they spent on these guys. And Crabtree got an okay deal. Snead got a modest 2-year contract, and John Brown got a 1-year prove it deal, basically. and then 2 draft picks. You never know what's going to happen, even if it's a first-round pick. And we still haven't seen Hayden Hurst in a game that matters yet. But I think you look at for what the resources that they invested, which weren't lucrative, they seem to be getting a pretty good return here. Now, they have to stack it, and they have to be consistent. And as they get deeper into the season, teams are going to be scouting them and see what they like to do and the routes that Flacco likes to throw with these guys. And you're always going to have that game of adjustments, but you're very much seeing an offense that is capable of moving the ball. Even against Cincinnati, as poorly as they started, they were able to move the ball from about, the second quarter on. Wasn't perfect. They made mistakes. There's no doubt about that. But, how many times have we seen, go back to last year, year before that, where this team just, they'd struggle to get first downs even. And you haven't seen too much of that early on. Certainly didn't see it against Buffalo and didn't see too much of it against Denver. It's been encouraging. And, to the point that you made, which is something that I've said really going back to before training camp even started, I think this defense, especially when it's healthy, absolutely can be a top 5 kind of caliber defense. And I think if this offense can be in the top half of the league, so we're talking somewhere in that 12 to 15 range, let's say, I think that's a formula that should, and I emphasize should because you never quite know, and this league's crazy, and you always have one-score games just about every week. But that should be a formula that should have them in position to make the playoffs. You think about where they've been the last couple of years with the top 10 defense and an offense that's been a bottom 10 defense, and they've been close even with that because of their special teams and some of the things that they do well on the edges, so to speak. So I think the potential's there. There's nothing about this game specifically that makes me say, wow, more so than just, okay, this is a little more like it. Week 1, Buffalo, maybe the Bills are a little bit better, or maybe they just fluked their way into one of the weirdest upsets in NFL history, Week 3. I still think that's a bad football team. I don't want to draw any conclusions from that. Cincinnati, we know the Ravens' history against them. We know Joe Flacco's history against them. So I don't think you should judge anything too harshly based on that one. And then Week 3, I think you take this for what it is. Denver, yeah, they were 2-0, 2 home games against kind of middling teams. It's not as though they were overly impressive in those first 2 games, but a team that certainly has talent and is capable of beating you if you don't come out ready to play. And I think the Ravens got a really good reminder of that in the first 90 seconds of the game. But after that, they handled their business. And as the home team against a team that I think they're better than, I don't know how much better, but they're better than, they did exactly what they were supposed to do then. And that's a good thing. That's not to take anything away from them. I think this was absolutely one of those handle your business kind of weeks, and the Ravens were able to handle their business.
Luke Jones is our guest. He is Baltimore Luke, and Luke at WNST.net. Out on Twitter and out on the internet, he'll be monitoring Pittsburgh week. It's true, the Steelers next Sunday night. Luke and I will be at the confluence for all things Ravens and Steelers. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at King Discount Liquors. Give the King a ring. I got to get over there to get some stout, lottery, beer, booze, and the best prices in Baltimore. They're in Rosedale. Go see Johnny Bev over there. And if you see me pop up in the King Discount commercials, say hello to Paul King for me. He's not on Facebook, so I got to go in there and actually see him. Freedmont Mortgage also, don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. You need the right lender. That's Carl Delmont and our friends at Freedmont Mortgage, sponsoring our swabbing with Alex Lewis last week at Michael's Cafe in Timonium. Also going to be sponsoring some swabbings at Buffalo Wild Wings in Bel Air. Back with us again. We're looking forward to getting back up there to the festival and doing some live shows as well. All of it brought to you by Freedmont Mortgage. You can learn more online by going to Freedmont.com, whether you're buying, selling, or thinking about it at all. Also, Al's Seafood in Essex. Been getting my crabs and crab cakes down there from Al's since I was a child in the 70s. Same great location at Stemmers Run and Eastern Avenue at the foot of 702 in Essex. It is Al's Seafood. Last but never least, the Modell Lyric is our partner. They got some great shows coming up. Mellencamp is happening. Steely Dan, Kansas. I got an interview with David Ragsdale. Also, the big Lord of the Dance is coming up next Thursday. That's the Irish Dance. Been talking to Alec Collins about that a little bit as well. They do this in a 100-pound suit. All of the details up at Modell-Lyric.com. Jonathan Schwartz from Modell Lyric's going to be joining us later on this week talking about all the stuff that's going on. You may have heard about the John Mayer concert coming up there in 2 weeks. That's all part of the Kimmel Cancer Center where my wife had her life saved twice over there at Johns Hopkins. So good stuff going on. There's always magic at the Modell Lyric, Modell-Lyric.com. Luke, the running game. I know they want to get the running game going, and I mentioned Alex Collins and the Irish dance they're going to be doing down at the Modell Lyric next week. We got a little Irish dance out of him. I still think they want to run the ball more, and I think it's interesting with Flacco saying we probably should have thrown it even more than we did, but you want to be committed to the run. But passing the ball has seemed to be something that has functioned relatively naturally in this offense, and that's not normal to see. And it does take away from the running game, and it does take away from the statistics when you look and say, well, they run it 30 and threw it 40, and they had a lead and all that. But the circumstances of the game, as Flacco says, and will say out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault if you want to hear his postgame, is really that the game dictates that. Going to Pittsburgh, I want to see him run it on Sunday night, Luke.
Well, they have to prove they can do it. I mean, they haven't run the ball well. I mean, I hear what Joe's saying. I don't disagree completely with what he said, but not as though they were running the ball all that effectively in the first half. I mean, at halftime, 11 carries for 28 yards. That's not very good. So, I mean, you can keep beating your head into the brick wall, and then you're dealing with second and third and longs all day, or you can kind of go with what works. Now, be very clear, they need to run the ball more effectively. I want to see them run the ball more, but as a product of them being effective doing it. They ran it 28 times on Sunday. That's fine. You're rarely ever going to see 50-50 balances in this day and age. You're just not. This has become a passing league, and anyone who thinks it's not, I think you're pointing to maybe one or two outliers across the league. I mean, that's just the way it is right now. The Ravens need to be able to run, but they need to be able to run effectively. So, I think it was functional, but 2.8 yards per carry. I'm going to be throwing it more too. And I think the point that Flacco was making was, they were smart to mix in runs as much as they did in the second half, but if you're going to do that, you need to gain yardage and you need to be productive doing it. And you don't want it to be run for 1, run for 2, 3rd and 7, incomplete, and then you have to punt. I mean, that's a perfect formula for, guess what, getting the opposition back into the game. So you need to do what's working, and I have no issue whatsoever with the Week 1 game plan because the Ravens threw the ball at will. Now, Week 2, they fell behind 21 points, and I think it's going to be really difficult to run the ball when you're trailing by that much that early. Could they have mixed in some more runs? Yeah. Do I think they should have figured out a way to have Alex Collins touch the ball more in the second half? And I think he had 4 touches after intermission last week. Yeah, I'm on board with that. But to just run the ball just for the sake of doing it, that's not going to work. So they need to be able to run more effectively. And if there's something to take away from Sunday's game, it's they didn't really get it going all that well. They were okay in the first quarter, 7 carries for 27 yards, and then you do the math the rest of the way, 21 carries for 50 yards after that. So.
And that's when they're going to need to run it. To Flacco's point, hey, we're up 2 touchdowns. Let's just run the ball and get the hell out of here, right? And if you can't do that, Denver controlled the ball for a long period of time in the third quarter and the fourth quarter, really, like that one drive that felt like it was never going to end, and it never did amount to anything, quite frankly, 2 touchdowns down. But it felt like Denver was crawling back in late because the Ravens couldn't control the ball, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it comes down to you have to be productive. The point of this game is not to have a 50-50 pass-run ratio. It's to score points and have more points than the opposition at the end and pick up yardage and have yourself in second and manageable and in third and manageable and hopefully pick up enough yardage that you don't have to be in third down all the time. And I think the Ravens have done a pretty solid job of that. So
when you're passing the ball effectively, you're moving the ball, right? And then you're running to offset the pass. Maybe that's the way it works out this year because they're a better passing offense than they are running off, and they might be a really good. To our point, we haven't even seen Hayden Hurst in this thing, right? Like before this thing's all over with, if the O-line gets a little more fortified, they might still be passing 60-70% of the times later in the year. But once you get up 2 or 3 touchdowns, that's when things change, especially at home, especially late in the year. But it's encouraging. I mean, I'm encouraged by everything I'm seeing, honestly. I'm also encouraged that there are no super teams in the league, other than the Dolphins, of course. But other than that, it feels to me like they're very much in the mix and they're very representative. And I feel good about that for all summer long, you and I talking that, hey, they might be pretty good this year. Well, it feels to me like they're going to at least be representative, and I like that.
Well, I think the next month is going to tell a lot because of the fact that they're going to be playing on the road as much as they are. They have a couple more division games coming up here very soon. As I said, this team plays pretty well at home, and they have played pretty well at home over the years, even since Super Bowl 47. Now, have they been as dominant at home as they were prior to that? Probably not, but they've still won most of their games. So I'm still not ready to make any bold proclamations other than just kind of going with what my preseason prediction was of them going 10-6. I think they can make the playoffs, and I think they can be 10-6. But that said, you have to do better than how they did against Cincinnati last week, and that's where this is really going to be a litmus test for them. Wins over Buffalo and Denver at home, that's great. Good. You should do that. They lost at Cincinnati, so that's not to... I'm not trying to be dismissive of them. They're still very much in prove-it mode. But guess what? So is everyone else in the league right now. So that's not uncommon. That's not something where you make some kind of bold conclusion at the end of 3 weeks. I think the next 3 weeks to me are going to say a lot more about the Ravens than the first 3 weeks did. And I think you see what happens with Pittsburgh. Clearly, that's a team that's been going through a whole lot. Of so much of it off the field, and they had their issues the first couple of weeks, and all that. But you have them, you have Cleveland. I mean, you go down the list. I mean, they're going to be facing some other playoff teams from a year ago.
Well, the Titans won in Jacksonville, right? Like just when you think the Titans are no good, that defense looks like it's going to pack, right?
Yeah. I mean, so again, I think these next basically. I think at the end of October, we're going to have a much better idea of where the Ravens are. To this point, I'll give them a thumbs up, sure. Do I think they're going? Do they have the look of a 12-4 team? I'm not sure we can glean anything based on what we've seen to this point to draw that conclusion. But I think you have to be encouraged with what you've seen in the passing game. I think the defense, considering the injuries that they've dealt with, I think it's been fine. I think, certainly they played lights out against Buffalo and one of the worst quarterbacks in NFL history. They clearly are better with Josh Allen out there. I think that much is apparent.
You think Nathan Peterman will ever start a game again in the NFL?
It would have to be. I mean, he might if Josh Allen gets hurt, but he should never start another game in the NFL. In fact, he was so bad, I'm not sure he should be in the league. But anyway, this isn't the Nathan Peterman hour. But
we'll address Colin Kaepernick in the next segment.
Yeah. But I think you just look at where they are right now. Defense, once they get Mosley back, they get Jimmy Smith back, I think we'll have a better idea of how good that group can be. Loved what I saw from Kenny Young on Sunday. I thought Zadarius Smith had a great game. Terrell Suggs really played well, as he's getting ready to turn 36 years old. So it's not as though they didn't have some standout performances, but certainly need to see. You'd like to see them start a little bit faster than they did, but not a big shock, especially when you get a blocked punt like that. That's going to kind of send some shock waves into your whole team to start off a game. But we'll find out about this defense as they get a little healthier, hopefully. And offensively, I really like what I've seen from Joe Flacco in the passing game overall. Running game, still very much a work in progress. And I'll still continue to say what I said to you last week, what I wrote at WNST.net over the weekend, previewing this game. By and large, the formula for Joe Flacco in his career has not been throwing the ball 40 to 50 times a game. I think you look at his record, most quarterbacks, frankly, don't function very highly when you're having to throw that much.
Well, once you throw over 35 or 40, traditionally you're losing, right? Period.
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly. And I mean, Flacco would have been over 50 pass attempts, but the Ravens had a lead, and they started running the ball a little bit. You know, not overly effective, but they were able to run the ball because they had a lead. But, you know, my point is with Flacco, unlike Drew Brees or Ben Roethlisberger, guys who, you know, have had some of those games where they throw 50, 55 times, Flacco typically hasn't been that kind of quarterback that thrives, but, you know, again, you got to move the football. And even though it worked out okay for them on Sunday, to Flacco's point after the game, yeah, we should run the ball when we have the lead like that, but we need to be more productive than that because you don't want to leave a team hanging in. And let's face it, you know, before the Owasso interception, that game was a touchdown away from being really, really interesting. So, you know, they left them in it a little bit, and part of that was, you know, they did run the ball, but they didn't run it effectively. So, you know, that part remains a work in progress. The offensive line remains a work in progress. We haven't talked about the special teams. The blocked field goal, I still don't quite get how that was legal based on the rule that was supposedly made.
I remember McCrary on leverage 20 years ago out in San Diego.
Well, I think back to two years ago in New England, Shea McClellan jumped over the Ravens line and blocked Tucker's field goal, and the rule was supposedly made to prevent that, and it was a player safety issue, and I still didn't get a good explanation from anyone, and the Ravens didn't get a good explanation on that one. So it'll be interesting to hear if the league puts something out more definitive on that. Now, fortunately, it didn't cost the Ravens the game, and certainly they still need to. I think they would still say they need to try to block that better, even if someone does jump over the line. But that's supposed to be something that was made illegal, and I still look at that and I keep asking myself, well, isn't that what they made the rule?
That's
against?
the spirit of the rule, right? Literally.
Yeah, I mean, apparently there was some talk about he started his leap in the neutral zone or something. I mean, it just, to make it very honest and blunt, the Ravens were confused about it after the game, why exactly that was legal. But, you know, fortunately it didn't hurt them, but certainly they had the breakdown on the punt block on the end of their first drive, and that can't happen because, you know, those types of plays, we always talk about plays that are made to win games, and when we talk about turnovers and defensive touchdowns, when you have a play like that on special teams, that can really flip the win probability in many close games. So fortunately, it didn't bite the Ravens in the end, but that's something that, you know, Jerry Rosburg is going to want to get cleaned up, in addition to as the Ravens, as we know, we haven't had a chance to talk about it yet, but Tim White was their return man. They made the roster move over the weekend. Janarian Grant out, Tim White in, and Janarian Grant, ball security issues. Tim White did okay in that department on Sunday, but he had ball security issues back in the summer. So I would venture to guess that this isn't necessarily the end of the Ravens' musical chairs in the return department. So despite being 2-1, despite being in good position and taking care of business, still plenty of things you can point to for this team to get better, and that's a good thing. That's an encouraging thing because you have a chance to get better and to put yourself in a position where you can be dangerous the second half of the season. He
is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke. He will be out in Owings Mills all week as we get ready for the Pittsburgh Steelers. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by Royal Farms. Real fresh, real fast. I don't have my cup here with my coffee in it. I feel a little like naked on the YouTube and Facebook Live here, but I'll get my coffee cup back. Real fresh, real fast. Make sure you're downloading the Rofo app or using the rewards card. Getting your fried chicken and Western fries freeze even better. It's Royal Farms and Justin Tucker with the $1 coffee going on right now. We'll see you at Rofo. Also brought to you by the Lee Tessier team, Baltimore's premier realty team, and the people I'm trusting with my real estate these days. With over 50 years of experience helping local buyers and sellers just like you, locating the best properties and getting the best deals. That's what they do. Go to LeeTessier.com to learn more about what they do. Also, Charles Newsonoff and Sons, since 1923, true love comes in all shapes and sizes. They got something for everybody and everybody's budget over Charles Newsonoff and Sons. They also buy gold. Go see them off 695 at Paring Parkway in Parkville or at charlesnewsonoff.com. They say, let's grow old together. Last thing for you, Luke, before we blow out here and mix it up a little bit. We got a lot more to talk about with the defense and the special teams. Just one little overriding point. winning games without C.J. Mosley, winning games without Jimmy Smith, winning games without defensive linemen as well. Not bad, right? I mean, from an injury standpoint, we saw this team fall apart at various points without Brandon Williams, without Jimmy Smith, playing without Hayden Hurst, right? They're playing without a lot of key guys right now and playing okay.
Yeah, and that's what you want to see. I mean, look, you're not going to be firing on all cylinders, and if you're going to be waiting for a fully healthy roster, a lot of times that's not going to happen because, they're going to get C.J. Mosley back, but guess what? Someone else will be out by that point or soon thereafter. And you rarely ever have a fully healthy 53-man roster. Now, you want to avoid being crushed by injuries, as the Ravens were early last season, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. Certainly 2015, we can talk about that. But you want to see, especially on the defensive side, because we've talked about it so much. Guys like me have written about it and been broken records about it. All these draft picks and all these free agent dollars that have been thrown at the defense where you just say, okay, you have all this depth. Well, you should be able to manage for a little while without C.J. Mosley. You should be able to manage for a few games without Jimmy Smith. You should be able to manage without a Michael Pierce up front. As far as one of the big members of your defensive line rotation. And that's not to say that you're just as good. It just means that you don't fall apart. I mean, my goodness, I can think back to games the Ravens played without Ray Lewis and Ed Reed over the years. Their defense wasn't as good, not even close, but it still was good enough that you could win some ball games, and that's what you need. You can't just fall apart completely when you lose one guy, other than maybe your quarterback, and that's kind of the one exception to the rule, and that's why I wasn't so hot and bothered about the need to keep Robert Griffin III, because I'm not sure that he gives them much of a chance to win if Joe Flacco goes down. But that's a different argument. The point is, because the Ravens have the depth that they have on the defensive side of the ball, and they've invested so much in having that kind of depth, they need to be able to survive and still play pretty well. And look, if you're going up against the Patriots and you don't have C.J. Mosley, and you don't have Jimmy Smith, and you don't have Michael Pierce, and maybe you're missing somebody else, then guess what? You're probably going to get beat because that team probably is better than you on paper if you're at full strength anyway. But if you can have some of those guys out and you're playing a team like the Denver Broncos, and especially you're playing in your home building, you need to take care of business. And that's why it was good, even with the rough start. The first drive wasn't their fault. That was a one play after the blocked punt. But after that second drive, where Denver really they march right down the field, they score on the kind of that jet sweep end around to Emmanuel Sanders on that 35-yard run, and you're saying, my goodness, I mean, is this defense just going to be completely gashed all day? They settled in after that, and they played some really good football. It wasn't perfect, but you'll take that any day of the week. You pitch a shutout after the first quarter. You don't like giving up 14 points, but the end result, 14 points, you're going to win most weeks in the NFL when you only give up 14 points. So it was good to see that, and good to see this team show some resiliency in terms of overcoming the injuries that they had and overcoming what was a really rough start and kind of a, I don't want to say workmanlike, because typically you use that descriptor and you're thinking, well, you ran the ball and you grind it out. Well, they had to pass, and they had to throw the ball to be effectively.
And it was raining, by the way, too. Point that out, too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's raining for both sides. But, yeah, I mean, they were able to pass the ball and move the ball through the air in less than ideal conditions. And as I said, maybe just make it rain for 16 weeks and Joe Flacco be MVP of the league. How's that?
All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at Sporticulture. We got beautiful flowers in the studio. You can send them anywhere by going to Sporticulture. That's sporticulture.com. My pal Court is very, very happy that the Ravens won on Sunday, so make sure you're checking that out. The flowers will be around me if I can keep Nala out of them and eating them in the studio, but it's a lovely, lovely thing. Also brought to you by the Boathouse in Canton, one of our newest sponsors. offering indoor and outdoor waterfront dining. The Dock Bar's in full swing. The weather's going to be a little better this week. Make sure you're getting over there and enjoying the just off the grill specialties. The Dock Bar is dog friendly. Ship happens at the Boathouse in Canton. So get on over there and say hello to those folks as well. It's Pittsburgh week around here. Everything we're going to do and everything we're going to talk about is going to be in the BuyAToyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Our morning newspaper ships directly and digitally to your email inbox free of charge every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where they're still getting folks in shape for $10 a month, and there's one right around the corner from you. Go to PlanetFitness.com and Planet of Triumphs to learn more. Also, learn more about the John W. Brick Foundation 5K run. The Brick family supporting that. We're supporting them. It's JWB5K.com to learn more. It's October 13th and 14th up in Timonium. Let's get your face in the place for my 50th birthday. The Wim Hof Experience also going on October the 13th. Learn more at Brick Bodies and at Planet Fitness about that. Also brought to you by the Maryland Jockey Club. The Maryland Million now held on October the 20th. We had the Francis Dash and a record a purse over the weekend at the Maryland Jockey Club down in Laurel. The big sports book opened down there. It is beautiful. If you haven't been to Laurel, make sure you get down there and check that out. Last but never least, any breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday driving you home from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.